And welcome into what should be a Tuesday edition. Is kind of a Tuesday edition, but feels more like a Monday, but it's not really a Monday because it's kind of a Tuesday, but it's a short week. I got no idea what day it is edition of Fourth Down in the Steel City. Alongside Josh Taylor, I am Chris Mack, and we welcome you to our little corner of the internet where if you're subscribing to Fourth Down in the Steel City, however you subscribe to your podcast, we appreciate it. Be sure to download, subscribe, rate, review, all those fun things. Be a part of the conversation with us. Yep, push the little buttons that Josh is pointing to wherever they are around your screen. If you're watching on YouTube as well, the 93.7 The Fan channel, we got you covered there as well if you prefer watching, which at least, judging by the numbers, I've been surprised by this, Josh. Before we dive into what Mike Tomlin had to say on Monday, short week press conference and all, it seems like a larger number of people enjoy watching us rather than just listening, which I have not yet comprehended because I was always told I had a face for radio, but here we are.
I think it's because they're so enthralled to see the empty space in my office that hasn't been filled yet.
Or
they're interested in the progress.
Exactly. They want to see what's next.
Yes.
Or they want to see how long my video stream actually stays stable when I'm doing this from the office. It goes out in like 7-minute increments because we're on that pay-as-you-go plan at Odyssey HQ here in Pittsburgh, where when the internet, when the hamster stops running on the wheel for a second to get a drink and bite to eat, the internet slows down, and then I just turn into a bunch of like Roblox type pixelations.
I was on that plan like 10, 12 years ago, probably not too long after you and I first met. So I'm just saying I've been there. So everybody got to get through that. Everybody got to get through that time period.
That's true. That's true. We all got to go through it. All right.
Exactly.
Mike Tomlin had to go through the questions today. He was down on the South Side answering them. And before we get into some of the stuff about preparing for Thursday and whether Kenny Pickett's healthy or not, all that good stuff, let's start with this: the look back on the officiating, because we talked about it a lot after the game Sunday night, early Monday morning. And the first thing he said, the first part of his opening statement was, and I'm going to call BS on this. I am, just right here and now. We want to win convincingly and, quote, definitively enough that flimsy calls don't affect them. At no point has the roster as currently constructed or the game plans as put forth on Sundays and the occasional Monday or Thursday given an inkling that Mike Tomlin wants this to be a dominant team. He sat there and espoused the virtues of having a quarterback who only shows up late in fourth quarters, and yet he's telling me now he wants his team to be dominant enough that they don't have to worry about bad calls. BS, I'm calling it right now, Josh.
The only actual definitive one I could say was probably the Rams game, and it was definitive in that they kneeled it out at the end. That was the only definitive part. They won it by a touchdown. And you want to call that definitive, then fine. But that's the closest to the definition you're going to find with this group. It's funny because my ears perked up when he said we want to win definitively. And I'm sitting there going, okay, we're still waiting on that. The next time will be the first one in a while. But at the same time, I got the traces of the old Jimmy Johnson speech. Like if you date back to all the way when he was the coach at University of Miami, and they lost to Notre Dame, and there were some controversial calls. And he said, look, you don't want to leave the game in their hands. And he told them this before that game. He says, look, we need to get to the point where we're in such a good shape, or as far as the score and everything, where we don't have to worry about relying on them to win the game. We don't want to leave it in their hands.
Right.
That part I do empathize with. The one he doing definitively part, that remains to be seen because it ain't happening. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it's happening anytime soon.
I'm doing my best Omar Epps meme face. Like,
what did he tell Chris Carter a couple weeks ago? Keep watching. Keep watching.
Yeah,
that's about it on that one.
We'll keep watching and keep waiting. When he was pushed about it a little bit later too, and some of the questions about the officiating, I think Jerry Dulac of the Post-Gazette asked him if he got any more clarity from the officials and he basically said, I'm going to keep those comments to myself as far as what questions he would be asking the officials. I would argue that at least one of those comments was not kept to himself, as we all saw it on TV and shared via social media.
He's going to keep them to himself because he already made them. That's why he doesn't need to repeat them now.
I literally, what the F is wrong with y'all today was, I mean, I've seen my wife give that look to me. I've seen parents give that look to their kids at the park. I've seen teachers give that look to kids at school. I've seen the boss give me that look before. What the is wrong with y'all today? And then the
I
reaction
give that
to
look to people.
whatever.
I give that
the
look to
side
people
chick
probably
said.
2 or 3 times a week. I give people that look on the Fort Duquesne Bridge. So
Yes. But there you go. We could kind of put that in the past now because did it affect the game? Yeah, we talked about it after the game. It's at least a 6-point swing.
I still want it on the shirt, though. I still want it on the shirt.
What's wrong with y'all today?
I want it on the shirt. I want it.
And if I can get Mike Tomlin's face in the middle of it, that would be perfect. That incredulous look on his face, like
we'll give him a cut. I'm cool with that. We can work something out.
Yeah, we'll get his charity or something, or
give him percentage.
Absolutely.
I'm cool with that. Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
But as far as rolling into today and looking forward to Thursday with just less than 72 hours really to get ready for a game, you get an idea of on these short weeks why home teams are so favored, why home teams win so many of these games. Because really, they're not going to work it all today. If they work it all tomorrow, to be very light. Mike Tomlin admitted that really they won't get an idea on the availability of some guys, including Kenny Pickett, until Wednesday, and that he will be a true game time decision. So that's it. You get really about 24 to 30 hours maybe to evaluate Kenny Pickett if you're Mike Tomlin and decide whether he's the guy or not. This is where it pays to have a backup quarterback or two who know the system pretty well, which they do have, regardless of how good those backup quarterbacks may be. But that's
or how you feel about them.
Exactly.
Because that too.
He did say it's going to be Trubisky if Kenny can't go on Thursday. So that is what it is. You know, I talked to Ron Cook and Joe Starkey earlier on what day is today again? Monday, about which quarterback is preferred. And it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other for me. Nothing against Mason. I am a little farther down the Mason path than some people. Not as far down the path as Chris Hoke is.
No one's as far down the path as Chris Hoke is.
Mama Rudolph ain't as far down the path as Chris Hoke is. I mean, come on.
I can only think of 2 people that are that far down the path. One of them is Chris Hoke, and one of them is one of our former coworkers, Melinda Roeder. That's pretty much it.
Yep.
Those are the 2.
Yep. And I'm not quite as far down that path as either of them. But I lean Rudolph a little bit more. But, I mean, you saw the little bit of an advantage Trubisky may have over Rudolph on Sunday when he broke the pocket and ran a couple times. And so I'm back. And what I was trying to say is that I don't think it matters who the backup is. I really don't. Trubisky or Rudolph, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Josh.
I thought you were onto something there as far as showing some of the things that Mitch Trubisky has that Mason Rudolph doesn't. The mobility aspect is something that really does aid Mitch Trubisky because if things fall apart, and we saw him do this a couple times on Sunday, if things fall apart, if the pocket collapses, if, let's say, he can't find the space that he needs to get open and do some things like that, he can actually move around and keep himself in the play because he can do that with his feet. That's something that helps him, and that may not help Mason Rudolph. However, the other side with Mason Rudolph, and I think this is something that Mason Rudolph does that could be better than Mitch Trubisky, and it might even be a slight edge that he has over Kenny Pickett. Mason Rudolph is actually a lot better at processing what's in front of him. Mason Rudolph can make that mental note, okay, when you get to this point, back foot hits, this guy's here, get the ball out, boom. That's one thing that he does really, really well. It's when things start to fall apart where Mason Rudolph kind of comes unglued. But that's the difference between the 2.
Yeah, I don't know if any of these 3 guys – actually, Trubisky might be the best at improvising when things totally fall apart. We saw that for a minute on Sunday where he broke free and found Deontay Johnson down the field despite running around like a chicken with its head cut off. You make a great point, though. And Brian Baldinger did a nice little breakdown on Twitter Monday morning of the Pickett throw to Deontay Johnson where Deontay slipped and fell in the end zone. And he points out, hey, if he gets rid of it on time, this is a touchdown. I still don't know because I don't know if Deontay's slipping and falling because Deontay's trying to stop and catch a ball that's behind him or if he's slipping and falling anyway. If Deontay Johnson realizes that the free safety is starting to come back to his side, so maybe he should sit down, and Kenny's reading that. Here nor there, you're right. The lack of processing speed by Pickett post-snap has been an issue, and you can see it on that play. Whether you blame it on Pickett's poor throw or Deontay spikes or whatever you want to blame it on, Pickett waits just a beat too long to unload that ball.
And honestly, that's something that probably you lose 4 points with. Because we talked about that first play of the game where he drops that ball. That definitely should have kept that drive going. It probably could have turned into points. I believe there was another drive where Kenny Pickett was flushed out of the pocket. I want to say this was on third down too. He flushes out of the pocket. Actually, might have been the same drive. He gets flushed out of the pocket. He rolls to his right. Puts out a throw to Deontay Johnson that couldn't be any better. Puts it right there on point, on the move. And Deontay just dropped it. It just... In this particular situation, he reacted to things breaking down. He rolls out, gives himself a chance, and makes a great throw. And his receiver just couldn't hold on to it. It felt like there were so many plays like that should have happened that just didn't for whatever reason. I think of the other third down throw where he tried to drop it on the corner route to George Pickens, that flag route. Yep. And he kind of got too much air under it and the defender knocked it away. I feel like if that's a more accurate throw, we're talking about a different play there. It was just small things here and there where this offense could have been a lot more cohesive and been clicking a lot better, but just those small things didn't happen. Some of it was processing, some of it was location, and some of it was just not executing. And in this case, Deontay Johnson not securing the football.
Yeah, and I do wonder if, with it being a short week again, like you're not going to have a chance to work on those timing things. You really do get just one practice in. That's it on Wednesday. And so you're not going to improve the timing at all. It is what it is. Kenny Pickett may be banged up. Not sure how those injured ribs may affect whether he can actually get rid of the ball or not. If it's Trubisky, I don't think we're talking about his timing improving at all either with just one practice. So you got what you got at this point. And compared to what Will Levis and the Titans had on Sunday, that ain't good. Now, I will take solace in this. Mike Tomlin basically said that Joey Porter Jr. is a starting corner now.
Yes,
that regardless of Levi Wallace's health, he has done enough to secure that role going forward.
There usually isn't much rejoicing during a Mike Tomlin press conference. I'm sure there was when they heard that because there are people that have been clamoring for this, you and I included. We've wanted to see this happen, and I think he's spot on here. I think Joey Porter has done more than enough to show that he's ready to take the job. And I thought he showed it against the Rams. I thought he showed it in this past game too against Jacksonville. There were some things that he really did well, and he's getting into that thing where he's finding himself around the ball more. And that's not something you could teach for a defensive back, for that instinct to get around the ball and be around the ball to make plays. That's something that I want to see more of, and maybe we can see that grow into something else as he gets more reps.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most frustrating parts of Sunday's game was the knee-jerk reaction by some people who weren't necessarily paying attention. That think Joey Porter Jr. was the reason Travis Etienne went 56 yards for a touchdown, when we could all see that it was DeMonte KZ who didn't do his job there. So I'll repeat it once more for those who may have missed it. Joey Porter Jr. did his job there. DeMonte KZ tried to make a play and vacated his responsibility, which led to Travis Etienne being wide open and running down the field for a 56-yard touchdown. But as Mike Tomlin also pointed out on Monday afternoon, Josh, it is a multi-man job replacing Minkah Fitzpatrick. So KZ's going nowhere. He's still going to be in that role. Keanu Neal's going to be a part of this solution, if you want to call it that, or attempted solution to replacing Minkah Fitzpatrick. Miles Killebrew, we saw him get some snaps on Sunday in that role. He'll continue to get some special teams ace, but in coverage and in the secondary, who knows? He did not say no to the possibility that I brought up towards the end of Sunday night's show about Pat Pete being thrown back there a little bit. Quote, very versatile, really good football intellect, positional flexibility, all terms that Mike Tomlin used when asked about Patrick Peterson maybe being used at safety and regardless of whether Fitzpatrick is healthy or not. So he didn't say no to it, Josh. He didn't out and out say no.
Well, I think he gave us the yes answer a week ago when they asked him about Patrick Peterson. And he was talking about, hey, we basically brought him in to be Cam Sutton because Cam Sutton left.
And he repeated that today, right?
He repeated it today. I think we already know the answer to that. I think he gave us, quite a few breadcrumbs at this point. And the fact that you've heard me reference this before. The bagpipe didn't say no. Really good Shel Silverstein poem. There's our first Gen X reference of the day. But yeah, the bagpipe didn't say no. So that leads me to believe if he's not going to tell you yes, you fill in the blanks. And Mike Tomlin's known for doing this. So he won't give you a definitive answer, but he will leave you small clues to let you fill in the blanks. And I think this is one of those.
Yeah, I think so too. He also was asked about, with the trade deadline being tomorrow, I guess for those that may be listening to this on Tuesday, it's today. He said, quote, "We're always open for business." I appreciate that. I like him leaving the door open, leaving the light on, Tom Bodett.
Yeah, I like the fact that he left that possibility open. And I think that's more of a thing where it's not just Mike Tomlin determining that they're open for business. That might be a little bit of Omar Khan saying the same thing. Because if we've known anything from Omar Khan, he's not afraid to make a move around the trade deadline. We've seen that now at this point. We know he could be aggressive, and it also doesn't hurt that in Omar Khan's case, he has some draft capital to work with. Because remember, before the season, he traded both Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green and got draft picks back for those guys. I want to say he got 3 or 4 picks out of those 2 trades. So you do have something to play with as far as what Omar Khan might be able to use in a potential trade situation. So yeah, Mike Tomlin saying, we're always open for business. I don't know if that's kind of a smokescreen or if that's really a nod to the guy that he's already labeled the con artist is saying, hey, you call him with the right offer, he just might go for it. Or if he calls with the right offer, someone else just might go for it.
I think the most fantastical ideas I've seen, though, to this point include 2 first-rounders and something else for Patrick Surtain. And I also saw somebody throw out Kenny and a second for Justin Fields. The Bears have done a lot of dumb things in the last few years. I don't know what you think, but I think that may top the charts if they took Kenny and a second for Justin Fields.
I think the Bears have been snookered at the trade deadline by the Steelers once too many recently.
Yeah.
That would be my official stance on the matter. I don't think they're going to do that a second time.
No.
But if they do, by all means, like,
hey,
come have a
bring
seat.
it on.
But, we brought snacks. But other than that, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Look, if nothing else, we saw the idea of Rush getting a helmet being included yesterday, which means another outside corner, kind of a poor man's Joey Porter Jr. I labeled him when they acquired him. If you have to go with Porter and Rush on the outside and Pat Pete is playing somewhere inside or free safety or whatever in some sort of hybrid Cam Sutton, Minkah Fitzpatrick light type role, I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah, I mean, I think it gives you better coverage on the outside, although we haven't seen Rush yet in a game situation at full speed get that opportunity. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, look, it can't be worse. It can't be Levi Wallace again.
I was waiting on that part. At the same time, let's not leave James Pierre out of the discussion because I don't think he played that badly against Jacksonville. I thought that first penalty call that they made against him was terrible because you had to literally go into the replay and find the frozen frame where he actually might have grabbed a receiver's jersey. I thought that was a little bit too fine, and I'm like, I thought that was a little bit too ticky-tack. But I thought other than that, he acquitted himself pretty well. So, yeah, if you want to open up that possibility of a Joey Porter Jr., a Darius Rush, a James Pierre, a combination of those 3 guys with Patrick Peterson floating somewhere in the background, which I think he might be better suited now with the ball in front of him as opposed to over top of him or behind him and not being able to locate it. That might be better by comparison. I'm actually okay with that thought. Not only because it might be better for Pat P, but it might be better specifically for that back half of the defense because you're going to need guys whose eyes won't portray them as easily because you can't have that happening that frequently. DeMonte KZ, I think he just saw a beach ball and tried to just jump out and catch it. But he got there and it's like, wait, it's not that big. And it was gone. It felt that way with that play.
And Pat Pete, look, he has a history of being good on the ball, right? He
Yes,
has a history
exactly.
of capitalizing on turnover-worthy plays. So if you need that in the back end of your defense rather than KZ, who you're probably going to ask to just chill now and just play a little
Right.
center field, then by all means, throw
Yeah.
it out there and see how it goes, especially if, like you said, you feel a little more confident in James Pierre after Sunday's game. You feel like you might have something in Darius Rush, then I'm all for experimenting in that secondary while Minkah Fitzpatrick is out. Back to the offense for just a couple minutes. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, at this point, like, A, I feel the same way about that, and B, at this point in Patrick Peterson's career, I want him coming to the ball instead of chasing it. So it works. It works well from both of those scenarios.
Because we saw what happens when he's trying to chase things down.
That's
Evan
all I'm
Ingram's running away from him. Yeah, good point.
There you go.
Mike Tomlin asked if George Pickens needs to have the ball thrown to him more. Quote, yes. That's it. That's all. He did point out, they rolled coverage Pickens' way most of the time on Sunday. Jacksonville did. We had an idea they might do that. I mean, that's what teams are going to do going forward is pick their poison. Do they want to allow Deontay Johnson to pick up 8 yards at a time when he does hold on to the football and he and Kenny Pickett do connect and ensure that George Pickens doesn't get open for big plays, big explosive plays down the field? Or do they want to roll the dice with Pickett to Pickens and make sure that Deontay Johnson isn't available on every single play? I think most defenses you find, especially ones that play an effective cover 3 more often than not, like Jacksonville does, are going to lean on, no, let's take the deep ball out of play and force them to just death by 1,000 cuts if they're going to beat us.
And honestly, there are a lot of offenses that are perfectly fine with death by 1,000 cuts. They don't mind it at all because for them, yardage is yardage. As long as you're moving forward and not moving backward or not moving at all because of incompletions or deflections, it's a positive. And more importantly, it's a lot less of a risk as far as trying to throw the ball deep into coverage and having it intercepted because, it happened twice in the second half against Jacksonville. God forbid you have that happen more frequently. So, yes, if you have to have that situation where, hey, teams are taking George Pickens away and taking a deep ball away, okay, fine. That opens you up for opportunities with Deontay Johnson, which, by the way, short to intermediate, I'll say this again, short to intermediate is his strong suit. That's his forte. That's where he is the most efficient. That big play last week against LA, it wasn't like it was a deep shot down the field. It was a pass that was short to intermediate that he got in space, broke a couple tackles, beat some guys, and turned it into a big gain. That is where he is really at his best. Not to mention the fact, okay, fine. You want to try to take away George Pickens deep? You got Deontay Johnson short to intermediate. Oh, yeah, we got this other guy, too, that runs like, 4-2, 4-3. Get him in space and roll the dice with that one. Pick your poison there. So there's options that they can go with that maybe not, they may not be the ideal of having the option of going to George Pickens down the field, but you take what you can get and use that. You use it like a jab almost. I'm going to use a boxing metaphor again. I did this during week 1. But that is the equivalent of using your jab to set up your power punch because now they can use those short to intermediate pass plays and get the defense kind of on their heels and force them to now start worrying about the short and intermediate pass, not to mention the fact that might even help open up your run game, which will force the defense to come up and start dealing with that too. And now what do you got? One-on-one on the outside. Boom, there's George Pickens. It's a sequencing thing more than it's just, okay, let's just do this for the hell of it.
Right. It's almost as if they could use a good, big, reliable target in the middle of the field for more than, say, 10 snaps. I don't know. It's just a thought. But one of the final things we're going to touch on, Mike Tomlin was asked about, is Rodney Williams getting more snaps than Darnell Washington on Sunday. And he said it had something to do with being down multiple scores late. I'm not. Yeah. Maybe Mike Tomlin isn't totally familiar with Darnell Washington's game. I mean, I would think he is. He drafted the man. But Darnell Washington, I saw in training camp. Granted, it's training camp, and in the preseason. Granted, it's preseason. Run routes like a wide receiver, tap his toes in the corner of the end zone like a wide receiver, and still be able to block like an offensive tackle. I don't understand what's going on that they're not utilizing him with Pat Freiermuth out, that they're afraid to just get him on the field. This is 2 weeks in a row, 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
His snaps have declined rather than gone up.
There's part of it that I understand, and I understand that they're going to use him a lot more in the run game because they think he's more suited toward the run game. I even understand that the thought process behind, okay, maybe you go to Connor Hayward more when you have 11 personnel in the field because Connor Hayward can do a few different things, and I get that part. However, I'm not confident in the thought of leaving that kind of guy out in the field, especially when you get into situations where you might want a Darnell Washington because you mentioned it. He could catch some passes here and there. Why not have him out on the field, even if you're in 11 personnel? Because now the defense has to figure out, are they trying to run? And if they are, if they're in that mindset you're trying to run, oh, look, here's play action. There's a wide open Darnell Washington in the middle of the field. We talked about this earlier. Does this offense sometimes get too specialized because of guys they have in the game and therefore making them appear more predictable? So just do something a little bit different, that just a personnel grouping that they may not see coming. Jacksonville had a play on during that game where they ran a play action with a 2 tight end set. Ran a play action, went down the field, and turned it into big yardage. And I think the Steelers just weren't expecting it because it was 2 tight ends, and they ran play action, and they ran it that kind of depth down the field. But that's one of those matchups where you might catch them thinking something else, and you use that to your advantage. Why not do that a little bit more with Darnell Washington? Plus, if you're going to run with him at 11 personnel, is that so hard? Is that so terrible?
No.
A guy who's the 6th offensive lineman helping you block in a passing set that might get you some yards for a guy like Jaylen Warren can't be the worst thing in the world, unless I'm missing something.
At the very least, get him on the field more than Rodney Williams. Like, I'm sorry, it just it doesn't make, like, if I'm choosing who I'm going to put out there in those late game situations, or situations where you're down, whatever it may be. You make a great point about Connor Hayward, right? A little more versatile. He can line up as an H-back. He can do all kinds of weird little things. But why is Rodney Williams getting more snaps than Darnell Washington? That part, it does not compute for me at all. If you want to tell me Darnell Washington got fewer snaps because of that situation where you're working from behind, okay, that's like you said, I get it. But in favor of Rodney Williams is where I was lost, the guy who didn't even make the roster out of camp. So that's where I have a hard time.
Right. And it's obvious that their skill sets are different. It's obvious that Rodney Williams is more of a pass-catching tight end, although he is starting to take more pride in his blocking, and it's something that's kind of become like a point of contention for him. But at the same time, I'm with you. I get what you think of him, but you got this guy. You got this guy that you traded back, and then he fell to you, and from what you told us, you pretty much ran to the podium when he fell to you to get him, and there were reasons why you wanted him. How about we explore those reasons in real time and get it out in front, and maybe even benefit from it? There's very little risk in getting a Darnell Washington out on the field, because what's the worst he's going to do? Block too many people? I'm confused at that.
Yeah, so that part.
And at this point, is blocking too many people a terrible idea for this offensive line? I don't think so.
Given their run game, actually, one more quick thing. Mike Tomlin was asked about the run game and how it improved after the bye last year, and how they've continued to struggle this year. And he gave an odd response about it not quite being past the midway point of the season. And it was like, well, you don't have to wait until November to run the ball effectively, Mike. Like, you can do that all season. I think he knows the flaws in this offense, and he's running out of ways to sort of gloss over it.
That might have been a little bit of an Easter egg too, because we've heard Mike Tomlin talk about how football changes when the calendar changes. And he talks about how you got to be able to win games in November and win games in December and win games in January. And one of the things he talks about to win games in December and January, one of the ways to do it is running the football. So he might have given us a small little Easter egg there.
Maybe.
That's when I file away and kind of keep that in a drawer and pull that back out later. Because if you want to figure out what a game plan might be down the road in that second meeting against Baltimore and maybe one of those 2 Ohio games, that might be the nugget you're looking for.
They're going to need some help blocking it up, though. The offensive line continues to struggle, and if you want to complain about Matt Canada, I'm all here for it. If you're talking about personnel groupings and things like that, route concepts, I'll repeat what I said late Sunday night, early Monday morning. I don't think he's the number one problem from that loss to Jacksonville. I think there's a bunch of other things. He's certainly part of it, but
weren't you talking about having a guy laying around? Weren't you talking about finding some help of a really big guy that might be able to help with certain problems? I think they got another one of those laying around too, as far as the offensive line's concerned.
Broderick Jones, is that? I've heard that name somewhere before.
That guy. Yeah. I thought some people got him confused with Zach Banner against Jacksonville, but no, that's Broderick Jones. Just so you guys weren't clear.
Yeah. Why did we
I could see the confusion.
Why did we move up to draft a guy who we're using as a tackle eligible? I just don't. It does not compute for me. Another thing that does not compute as far as personnel groupings go.
I'm not knocking my own headphones off again. I did that yesterday. I'm going to take it easy. But the level of frustration I saw, let's just say level of frustration I had when I saw that, it was rivaled up there with me yelling at people on the Fort Duquesne Bridge. Actually, it's about the same thing.
Yeah,
it was close. I understand why there might be a need for that, but I also understand that you have it in place to where you don't have a need for that.
Yeah.
So why not just do the other thing? I'm confused. It's going to take a while for me to figure that out.
I increasingly, look, I've had this sense really since the first week of the season after they got absolutely waxed by the Niners. There's no confidence in this offense whatsoever from anybody anywhere in the building. So, and Greg Finley, our producer, just put in the chat a link to this quote. We were able to get some turnovers, but they weren't the type of turnovers that tee up the offense in terms of being on the short field. I appreciate them. They keep the score down, but they weren't the type of ones that teed up the offense. Does a turnover have to be on the short side of the field in order to capitalize on it? That's another
for
thing.
This offense, yes.
Exactly.
For this offense,
that's what he's telling you. Yes,
it does for this offense. I mean, what's the old saying? The best offense is a good defense. I think they might be taking that a little bit too literally, but I actually understood that part. But he also acknowledged the fact that those turnovers were necessary because it kept points off the board for Jacksonville, and he's right, and it probably kept the Steelers in this game. It was a 10-point result. It could have been a 20-point result if they don't get one or two of those turnovers in the first half. And that's the thing that gets left out because some people, in particular, I won't say who, are still complaining about the defense and how good they aren't. And I'm sitting there going, do you realize how much worse this game could have been if they didn't have those 3 turnovers in the first half? You could have been down, as much as 17 maybe at halftime as opposed to just 6? It could have been way worse. So, yeah, it's kind of weird to think, okay, well, these turnovers didn't help the offense because you weren't on the plus side of the field. But it also did help the offense because they didn't have to work from as far behind as they potentially could have, like they had to against Houston and against San Francisco.
It was just a mess Sunday. The penalties didn't help. The turnovers did, even if they didn't help enough. And somehow, here they are, 4-3. I threw this up as a cheap heat kind of Twitter poll Sunday night. Who's the better 4-3 team, the Steelers or the Jets? Oh, that face says it all.
I will say the Steelers only because they've beaten better teams.
Okay.
They've beaten Baltimore.
Yeah.
They've beaten Cleveland. And Cleveland's a better 4-3 team than the Jets.
That's
Baltimore's a 6-2
if you had to rank
team.
them. Yeah.
Now, granted, another win is over the Rams, who are now 3-5.
Yeah.
But people love Sean McVay. So a win over Sean McVay is a win over Sean McVay. If you want to, and you won that game on the road. Yeah, so I will go with the Steelers. I will go with the Steelers just because of the quality of the wins they got. Beating Vegas, I don't really count.
It's by the hair on the chin, and that's kind of scary. That Zach Wilson's Jets are only this far behind Kenny Pickett's Steelers, and that's
we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers' Jets. We're talking about Zach Wilson's Jets, which makes this conversation so strange.
Why?
But when you have to get down into the granular details of how each team won and who they beat, and the Jets had to squeak past the Giants, that's slight edge to the Kenny Pickett Steelers over the Zach Wilson Jets, who, by the way, those same Jets beat the Steelers at Acrisure Stadium last year.
Yes, the same Kenny Pickett's first ever action in an NFL game.
There you go. You go.
I will say this, though, guys. The Jets beat Buffalo and the Jets beat Philadelphia. They beat the Eagles, and that is the only loss that the Eagles have had this year.
Fair. That is fair.
I don't know what the hell to make of things anymore. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I'll count the Eagles win. I don't know if I want to count the Buffalo win as much anymore.
No?
The Bills aren't as good as people thought they were going to be.
They're not as good as they should be. I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I expected more out of Buffalo. I was high on Buffalo last year. I thought Buffalo really had a shot. I loved that roster, the way it was put together. They had a lot of depth. They had a really good defense. They had an offense that can score from anywhere. And that promise kind of went out the window last year, and it's gotten worse this year.
Here's a safe conclusion we can all agree on. 4-3 on the AFC side of the bracket does not necessarily make you good.
No.
That is a very true statement.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of teams right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say it's a lot of teams, but there's a handful of teams that fit that description. Because you're talking about Steelers, Jets, Browns, Bengals.
Are they 4-3 now?
They're on the up and up, though. The Bengals look like the Bengals again.
Yep. Yeah. So, you take the 4-3 teams in the AFC, and it kind of feels like Cincy and then the other guys. And the other guys all have glaring holes or weak spots or whatever they may be, if not multiple glaring holes or weak spots.
I think the AFC just became a lot more existential. What is 4-3 exactly?
On that note, we'll let you ponder that until we get you the next episode of Fourth Down in the Steel City, which will come to you, let's see, at some point on Wednesday. We'll get you prepped for Thursday's game. And whether you get it late Wednesday night or you get it early Thursday morning, get it however you get it. Yeah, however you get the podcast, as my mic just cut out again and my camera. Be sure to get it again late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, as we will build the game plan and get you ready for Steelers-Titans on a Thursday night. Thanks to Greg Finley, our producer, for somehow keeping this thing together with duct tape, bubble gum, and chicken wire. Thanks to Josh Taylor for bearing with my obviously terrible connection here at the office.
Yeah, usually it's me.
Well, hey, we just trade places. It goes like that sometimes.
We share everything around here. On that note, as Chris laughs on his way out, we will end it from there. I think Chris was thanking all of us, and thank you guys for joining us both on the podcast side of things and also on the 93.7 The Fan YouTube page. We will be back to build the game plan and get you ready for Steelers and Titans at Acrisure Stadium Thursday night. I know Chris doesn't call it Acrisure. I kind of have to, or I'll get in trouble at work. So that's just how it goes. In the meantime, see you later.